Welcome to Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today's honored guest is Adonijah Henderson. Adonijah, what's up, fam?
Hey, how you doing? How you doing? I'm good. I'm glad to
Good,
be.
good. I already told you, man. I specially prepared for you. I did not shave so I can match your beard. I came straight from a swimming lesson. I ain't even bothered to change.
Mm-hmm.
I'm real casual today.
For sure. That's what you saying. I'm
Yes,
good.
sir. So look, man, I want to thank you for switching out. You were a pinch hitter for me. I had someone cancel out, and we were already kind of chopping it up about you and
Mm-hmm.
I doing this. So thank you for coming on today, kind of last minute and getting this in. I definitely feel like, though you've heard some of these components before, doing this one-on-one hit different. And I want to make
Right.
sure that yeah, we have some impact to help make sure that you're getting into the next decade of your life with some focus and with some direction. So that sound cool?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So right away, you've heard this title in the Kingdom Advancement Center at some point, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. You've heard pieces of this, but you've
Right.
never had a chance to really react to it. So my first question for you, Adonijah, is do you consider yourself to be a genius?
Yes.
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 Okay. Have you always thought of yourself as a genius?
No.
All right. So what
Not
changed?
always.
What changed? When did it change and why did it change for you?
Um, for me specifically, I I think I grew up with a lot of self-doubt. So I grew up around people who are obviously like more intelligent than me. So like I I've like subconsciously compared my intelligence to others,
Yeah.
just, told myself like, oh, I'm not as smart as this person or that person. But I have to I had to come to the realization that um there are some areas in my life that I'm more of an expert at than others. I think in terms of genius, I have more of a strong will. So like maybe if talent doesn't come, then hard work comes. I think that's sort of my genius is like preservation.
Okay. That's really good though. My fault. You want to say something else?
No.
All right. So you said some good things already off the top. This is something that many of us do. All of us are guilty of this, whereby we compare ourselves to somebody else and we look at them
Mm,
shining in their lane and we're like, well, doggone it, I don't shine like that. But your lane is different from theirs, even if it's
mm,
apparent, right? Your lane
right.
is different from your talent may be the same. Because we'll get into this later, but talent is very much generational. But how it
Mm,
manifests in each generation is different than the generation that came before it. And so we have to, Bible even talks about this over in like Second Corinthians 11 or something like that, where it says like, do not compare yourselves with yourselves. But we do this all the time. And when we
mm,
do this, we discredit how God has fearfully and wonderfully made us because it doesn't because of the self-doubt that we have, it doesn't measure up to somebody who we either admire or somebody who we do think like they're a genius. So
right.
I like how you said that you're an expert in some levels, and what the world calls like a subject matter expert. Corporate America loves this little phrase, this three-word phrase, subject matter expert, and then the world loves this phrase genius. But we're going to talk about genius from the perspective of the Bible, which in Second Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 2:16, it calls it the mind of Christ.
Right.
And because we're all a part of the body, born again believers are a part of the body of Christ, and He is the head of that body. And the head is the mind. And
Mm,
every aspect, every member of the body has access to the mind. Every member of the body, I'm talking biologically right now, every member of the body communicates with the mind in concert to help us be able to walk and talk and do all the things that we have been fearfully and wonderfully made to do. And then that communication is where the genius lies because we're accessing this mind of Christ as
right.
Christians, as believers. So that's the kind of vein and lane that we're going to be flowing in. Um, so let me do my follow-up question. Who comes to mind when you think of this word genius? This may be a two-part question. Who comes to mind when you hear this word genius, though?
I'd say like automatically, I think like probably my parents,
Yeah.
but
So go ahead.
I also think a couple of the friends I grew up with, just like distant relatives. So you come up to mind because I hear the word genius in you mostly. So like
Salute.
yeah, so that's what
I
it's just
appreciate that.
yeah, that's where my brain goes. But it goes in a lot of different directions, but definitely like I definitely think of my two parents like first and then it like spreads out.
Now, that's interesting because the several people that you have in your life that are close to you. The reason
Mm,
why I'm going to make this a two-part question is because I knew that you were going to identify people that you actually have a relationship with. Most people
mm,
identify somebody that they've never been in contact with because they're either dead or
right.
they're just a celebrity, right?
Mm,
And so we're gonna jump on that in a minute. But I like how you have several people within arm's reach that you're like, no, I got genius around me
mm,
because the question then becomes the genius that you see around you from your parents to your relatives to your friends to me, these are the names that you mentioned. Do they all operate the same?
not at all.
Not at
No.
all, right?
Mm-mm.
You see, and so if you can see that they have their different elements, their different lanes that they operate in, but you still give this same label of genius to them, you have the same genius. It's not going to
Right.
look like anybody else's. And I'm glad that you've already come to this realization. But we're just going to dig into what it looks like. We're going to see how specific the Holy Spirit lets us get, because this very much becomes a prophetic exercise when we flow through these components. So the Lord gave me these three components for a workshop, which eventually became a book, which is what I'm talking about. And it comes in three components. Genius does. It comes in your passion, talent, and purpose. And so we're going to
Right.
walk through what those three things are for you specifically and generically as
Mm,
well, to figure out what it is that you've been put on this planet to do.
mm.
So let me backtrack again and say, okay, now who do you think comes to most people's mind when they hear this word genius? People who don't know your parents, like just the average Joe. Like when I do these
Right.
workshops, there's one name that comes up all the time. Who do you think that name is?
I would say like probably like Albert Einstein.
You got it.
His, yeah, his name
It's like
is
synonymous
like yeah,
almost.
like it's always synonymous. Like that's the most famous example.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally, I don't I my brain like divvies up like in what area are we talking about? Like I think of like a music genius or
Sure.
athletic genius or like a political genius or something like that. So I I go in many different realms of thought when
And
I
that's good
personally
though,
think, yeah.
because the diversity, here's the thing,
Mm-hmm.
there is a lack of perceived diversity in genius, which makes people discount themselves from it. So when Einstein pops up in their mind, here's what happens. Einstein is on another level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because he's on this other level and we associate genius to that level, we also disassociate it from ourselves. Like, I ain't Einstein. I don't know nothing about physics. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like physics kicked my butt when I got in college. Physics almost made me change my major. I'm like, I don't think I'm cut out for this, because I could not wrap my mind around. I was a
Right.
good student all my life, but physics knocked me on my tail. And so the average person is going to say, I don't know what E equals MC squared really means. Who knows? Who cares what the theory of relativity is talking about? Though it governs a lot of the electronics and things that we use every day, the average Joe doesn't know what that means. And so when they
Mm-hmm.
hear genius, they associate it to Einstein. They think of all these things that he innovated. And they're like, I'll never do that.
Right.
I don't understand what that
Exactly.
is. Therefore, I'm not genius. And that's
Mm-hmm.
flawed thinking. Okay.
Exactly. Right.
You've already gotten into why it's flawed thinking, because you're saying, like, when I think of genius, I think of, athletic genius. I think of political genius. Like, you think of all these different lanes. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing about life. You got to figure out what your lane is and then stay in your lane, right?
Exactly.
You right here. Just
Yeah.
you just stay right there,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what we got to figure out. So in the same way that we kind of deconstructed genius and then reconstructed it, and we didn't have to reconstruct it that much for you because you already see that you have it. but we're going to do the same thing with the first component, and that's passion. All right.
Mm.
So when it comes to passion, I'm going to ask you a similar question. What words come to mind when you hear this word passion?
Um, well, me specifically, I think like music, because that's a, or like kind of sports, but I think more music because that's a skill that you actually, it's like um passion is a required emotion to like do it well,
Yep.
because there isn't really like, there's there's like a formula to it, like you can like read it and learn it, kind of like math,
Mm-hmm.
but no passion for it, it sounds really dull and lifeless. So to me, like being a musician is just a person who's full of passion.
All right. You mentioned too, in addition to music, I heard you mention athletics or sports.
Mm,
And
right.
sometimes when I talk to sports teams about this concept, they'll tell me like their sport. If I'm talking to basketball players, my passion is basketball. My passion is
Mm,
whatever sport they play, they say that's their passion. And I do, by the time I finish with the workshop, I've kind of reconstructed some things because
mm,
where I'm about to go with passion is probably someplace you haven't heard before outside of me talking about it in church. And you
mm,
might have never got a chance to have this one-on-one like time to process and respond to it in real time. So passion is very much about drive. Like
right.
passion, you can fail at something, but when you're passionate about it, you're not gonna be like, well, I guess that's not for me. You're gonna get up and do it again. You're gonna be like,
Exactly.
nah, like fail is just, I have an acronym for fail, and it's called the first attempt in learning. A person who's
Mm,
passionate understands that acronym because they'll be like, yeah, I failed that time, but I'm about to get right back up and do it again.
exactly.
Like it's not going, it doesn't matter. Like I am driven towards this thing. I had one of my guests say that passion is the fuel in your tank,
Mm,
right? It propels you forward and propels you through whatever you come up against, whomever you come up against, in your goal to reach this, whatever this thing is. You're like, nah, you're not stopping me. Like, and you
right.
see that in artists, right? You see that in athletes who have this passion, but I'm not, but your talent is different from your passion. Like those basketball players and football players and sports people who I talk to, I redirect them and say, your talent is actually the thing that you're good at in this sports. All right. When it comes to passion, one of the words that comes to mind is almost like number one with the bullet, the same way Einstein is number one when we think of genius. But the word that most people end up saying or circling around is the word love. That eventually comes
Exactly.
into the equation, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna come at it from the same spectrum, but from the opposite end of love. So what's the
Mm,
opposite of love?
hate.
Hate. So we're gonna talk about passion as it relates to what is it
Right.
that you hate though? And
Mm,
this isn't a new concept that I've created or God has given me. I got it from a book. The
mm,
book was called The Assignment. And this author, Mike Murdoch, not Matt Murdoch, we're not talking about Daredevil, but this author, Mike
mm,
Murdoch, said, look, if you can figure out what it is that you hate, you're going to figure out what your assignment is on this earth. So the assignment doesn't come from something that you declare, it's something that God has created and designed you to do, right?
right.
And we know that God, he doesn't hate people, he hates sin. He hates
Mm,
wickedness. It grieves his heart to look out on this planet and see it out of order and out of pocket because God is a God
mm,
of order, right?
mm,
And so the disorder that sin caused, that the devil caused by falling to the earth when he got cast out, has
mm.
caused him to create a solution, caused God to create a solution. Do you know who that solution is?
Jesus.
It's Jesus, but Jesus was
Or
born
us.
of a,
Well, he was born.
he was born of a man,
Right.
right? He's called the
Mm,
Son of Man. And so mankind, God created
right.
mankind in his image and likeness to fix what he saw as broken in the world. And there's a lot of brokenness in the world. Wouldn't you
Right.
agree? The world is
Yeah,
broken. I don't think anybody
definitely.
disagrees with this, right? And
Definitely.
so there are some things that are broken, though, Adonijah, that really get underneath your skin, different than me.
Definitely.
Like you'll see it and you'll start going off, and I'll be like, I don't really have an issue with that. You be
Right.
like, that doesn't bother you. So I
Mm,
want you to think about what it is that when you see it, you be like, that's a problem. I want you to think about it from this perspective. Like, what would somebody else say is your passion? Because typically when we see that thing, that broken thing, and we begin to talk about it, our friends and family begin to know, like, don't let Adonijah see that because he's gonna go off. Like, oh, they
Yeah.
know, like, watch what happened. Adonijah's about to go off when you see this, right? And all of us have that moment, right? You can tell because we'll just start talking about it, or we'll say things like, somebody should do something about that. And if you keep finding yourself saying somebody should do something about that, guess who that somebody really is?
That's you.
It's you.
Yeah.
Because God has wired you in such a way that your heart is grieved with a portion of what grieves his heart. And he's like, the only way that you're going to do something about it is to focus on it, because you're like, I hate that though.
Exactly.
So what is it, Adonijah, that you hate? It could be anything. Don't have to be spiritual. Like, it can be like, what is it that you hate?
Yeah, I'm overwhelmed with thought, but I'd say I hate dismissal. Like, when I see people like struggling in a certain area of life, and we dismiss it and we don't take it seriously.
Okay.
Like, people like gaslight them. I don't like being put in situations where I see two people in a back and forth, and neither is like taking the time to actually understand the problem, because they just want what they want, regardless of like the consequences, or regardless of like how the other person operates.
Okay.
So
these are huge things that you're mentioning, because they deal with human nature, and human nature is so flawed, right?
Right.
And it's so complex in how it's flawed, that there's not an easy fix to it. And so when you begin to tap into what it is that you hate, and then understand that God put you on this planet to do something about it, you basically come into a David and Goliath moment. David saw Goliath talking all this smack for 40 days. He was like, is somebody going to do something about this? Like, this uncircumcised Philistine dog is sitting there talking about the God that we all serve. Y'all not bothered by this? He's like, man, give me my slingshot. I've killed lions and tigers and all bears. Oh my, right? I've killed all manner of stuff with this particular thing. Give me 5 smooth stones and a slingshot, and we're gonna find out about this giant today. Like, he wanted that smoke, right? Nobody else wanted Goliath's smoke. He didn't care. And the thing that became very interesting about David is somebody tried to give him the wrong equipment. If you remember the story, somebody said, hey, look, Saul, the king at the time, was like, here, take my armor, he was like, nah, this don't fit me though. This don't feel good on me. Right. Let me get my stuff though, that I'm already used to operating in. And that starts to get into, what'd you say?
It's not his lane.
It wasn't his lane. That starts to get a little bit into the talent piece, because your talent is the God-given tool that you have in your hand that comes from generations. Like, this talent doesn't come out of thin air. It's been passed on through the generations. So it's already in your hand. And you got to look at it and be like, this is, David could have dismissed it. Like, man, I'm not going to use that slingshot. I mean, that's for something else. He was like, no, I'm good with this slingshot. Give me that though. Think about Moses. Moses was complaining. God told him what he needed him to do. Like, your assignment is to deliver my people. You done already killed an Egyptian person because you saw them oppressing your people. That's your passion, clearly. You've been put on the planet to let my people go. Go do it. But Moses was like, I can't speak right. I stutter. He's like, man, who formed your mouth? He's like, don't worry about it. I'm gonna give you your brother Aaron. Moses wasn't satisfied. He kept talking smack. He kept kicking back like, yeah, I don't know though. That's not gonna be enough. And what did God say to him? Ultimately, he said, dude, what's in your hand though? He's like, I just got this raggedy staff. Like, he's like, put that staff on the ground, turn it into a snake, pick it up by the tail, turn it back into a staff. He was just like, that's the power you got in your hand right now. Just ordinary staff is what you're going to use to deliver my people. And you know what happened? By that staff, he wrought 10 miracles, 10 plagues that came upon Egypt. In the 10th plague, Pharaoh let his people go. And so we tend to overlook the thing that seems common to us, but David didn't. Moses did at first, but God reminded him, what's already in your possession though? And we've heard that language at our church before, right? So I need to backtrack for a second though, because I want to give a quote to you that really helps conceptualize what it is we're talking about and how big it is to know your lane. Okay.
All right.
You gotta let me know if you've heard me say this quote before. All right. So it's funny because I've told people for years that this quote comes from Einstein because that's where I found it. But now, I put it out on Facebook recently, and the Facebook police like hit me up and was like, "Yes, this is not factual." I'm like, "Oh, okay. What you gonna do? Shut me down?" Like, okay, I quoted it incorrectly. It doesn't matter where it comes from, but it matters what it's really going to unlock when I say it. All right. So you ready for it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me know if you heard it before outside of me, and then let me know how it hit you though.
Okay.
It goes like this. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid. So had you heard that before?
So in almost every public school I went to, there's at least one poster that has that. Like, I think it's an Einstein quote.
It's attributed to Einstein, but they're saying it's not from him.
Yeah. Well, I just remember seeing in like middle school and in high school, like at least one in every like 4 teachers, they have an Einstein poster with that quote. So it's like I've seen it. I don't remember I think you said it maybe like at open mic like one time, but yeah, I've definitely heard it before.
How does that hit you though? How do you internalize that? What does that mean?
Well, when I first read it back in like middle school, I attributed that to like what's the word? I attributed that to like ableism. Like some people like ableism, like
ableism. Okay.
Like some people, well, everybody is born with different physical abilities.
Yes.
So we can't make everybody do the same thing. And that was kind of hard for me to grasp my head around, especially in my like specific like family structure. I have people in my family who are athletic and unathletic, and when they look at me, they see athletic potential in some areas and not others. Okay. And I try to fit myself in some areas and not the ones that I was literally built to be in. So like I had trouble like grasping my head like, oh, if I'm, fit, this is me in middle school, I should be able to do this. Yeah. But that wasn't the case. And so that quote kind of helped me wrap my head around the fact that there is a lane that I'm supposed to be in, and that's where I should invest my talents into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And so it gets into this whole aspect of failing again, right? Because you may try out for some different things athletically and it not fit, right? And you got to figure out like, okay, this is my first attempt in learning. Either I'm going to keep at this particular sport or I'm going to try a different sport until I find what clicks for me, right? I just finished watching the movie Rise about Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he was not good at basketball for a while. At least how the movie depicted it, but he kept at it. He had brothers that kept at. His brother was his older brother was better than him, but kept inspiring him and motivating him, and to the point where we see who he is today. He's the Greek freak, but he did not start out that way, right? And his family, his father was athletic, but he was in soccer, right? And that's the same for Hakeem Olajuwon. He said before he got into the NBA, he had only been playing basketball for 5 years. He was a soccer player, but then just switched degrees, and then all of a sudden just bloomed, right? And so there's a gestation period, so to speak, where you might not necessarily be automatic at it, but you got to keep at it and see how you develop, right? And so the fish, this quote is a metaphor about what you're speaking about, what we're talking about, because a fish, well, let me backtrack for a second. You mentioned physical attributes, but we're also talking about mental attributes, right? All your attributes. But from the perspective of this quote, a fish is designed to swim in the water.
Mm-hmm.
It has scales, it has gills, it's streamlined, right? How
Mm-hmm.
it's designed is for this element we call water. But if you take this fish out of its element and tell it to climb a tree, like you've completely dismissed, that's your word, you
Mm-hmm.
completely dismissed the design of the fish in favor of what you think the fish should be doing. Somebody is
Exactly.
telling this fish it needs to be climbing a tree. And
Right.
because this fish doesn't know who or what it is, it's been tricked into believing that it should be trying to climb this. This is how I internalize this picture. I
Mm-hmm.
picture this fish just constantly doing the same thing, beating his head up against the wall. But you know what's going to happen if this fish stays out of water long enough, right?
No, you'll
Yeah,
die.
it's going to die.
I almost said drown, but drown.
If a fish drowned, then yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
survival of the fittest. It was something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Something was wrong with
Mm-hmm.
its gills. It wasn't supposed to survive. But yeah, a
Right.
fish will die if it stays out of its element for too long. And I've been seeing genius out of its element for too long, Adonijah.
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing it dying. And so the
Right.
Lord has purposed me to revitalize, resuscitate, and restore, redeem, resurrect the dying genius that I see around me, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because once we all start to tap into this genius, then we can all begin to address the brokenness of the world from different angles so that we all come together and be like, let's get this back in order. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing about this fish, I also see when I think about this fish in this tree, the tree represents a system that the fish does not thrive in.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's an element of water, but there's this system that this tree represents because somebody is saying, hey, fish, climb this tree. If you don't climb this tree, something's wrong with you. That's a system. If it happens over and over again, because there's this established way of doing things that you keep trying to shoehorn people into, and not everybody fits into it, that's a system, and that system is broken. And
Right.
so the best example that I can give you of a broken system is the school system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna give you an example that speaks to that, like directly. You ready for it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I try, you know this person, but I'm trying to say names. I had a principal come to me one time that went to our church, and she was like, "Hey, look, I got these 10 little boys, these 10 little minority boys that are struggling right now. And can you just come talk to them? Can you just talk to them on a weekly basis? Can you come through on a Friday?" And I'm like, bet, yeah, I'll do it. I had just started workshopping this whole concept of genius. So I was like, I know exactly what I'm gonna start talking about. I'm gonna talk to them about genius. So I get there, 10 little boys. They were in third, fourth, and fifth grade, but they were all in the
Mm-hmm.
same class. So that's already a light going off. Like something's not right here.
Right.
In one class all day, they're separate
Mm-hmm.
from everybody else. They're alienated. They've been
Right.
dismissed. I'm gonna keep triggering your
Exactly.
word, right?
Yeah.
And so I started talking to them. I'm like, hey, look, y'all know y'all genius, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Adonijah should have seen how they looked at me. And it was like, this guy, like, I don't think you know who you're talking to. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that is not us. They got offended that I even
Right.
tried to affirm them in a positive way. But then in the same breath, they started like roasting one another and thought that was hilarious. Like, you waterhead, this and that and the third. And I'm like, oh, so y'all, it's cool to accept these negative words that y'all spitting at each other. But when I come at you with something positive, you're like, don't call me that. Right. And the reason
Right.
why is because they had these things put on them: ADD, ADHD, emotionally
Mm-hmm.
disturbed, or disruptive in class, all these negative labels that they got used to
Mm-hmm.
hearing and
Right.
beginning to believe. Keep thinking of the
Right.
fish before, right? And so when I began to say, hey, look, maybe your lane is something different, their first reaction was like, who you talking to? So I said, all right,
Mm-hmm.
that's cool. The reason why I always, one of my first questions is to ask people what they hate is because when I do this workshop in front of youth, middle schoolers, high schoolers, they always can tell you what they hate. Think back to being like 13, 14, and somebody would have asked
All
you
right.
what you hated. It might have been different from what you told me just now, but you would have had an instant answer though,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, you all tell me what you hate though. And these boys, these 10 little boys, Adonijah, who could never agree on anything, I would sit there and watch them argue, fuss, and fight over what game to play, how to play it, when to play it. But they all universally told me the same thing. What do you think it is that they identified? What system was in place that was making them feel like they didn't belong, that they all told me universally, I hate this?
Cool.
School.
Yeah.
And so the teachers in the background sweating like, oh my gosh, like who is this man? Why is he coming in here letting them say that they hate school? And I'm like, well, it makes sense to hate school because school is making you feel marginalized. I didn't use that word, but it's making you feel like you don't belong, you don't fit in. And I said, let me tell you why though. And they're kind of like looking like, okay, tell us. So I said, okay. I said, there are 8 different learning styles. And at most, school is only teaching from 3: visual, auditory, and then a left brain logical thinker. So if you're right-brained, or if you learn through kinesthetics, meaning you have to move around, like there's several people who have to move around to absorb information. But if you're moving around in class, what do you get told to do? Sit down, be still. There's also exploratory, which is what we're doing right now. But exploratory is more so hands-on. You got to put your hands on stuff, or expeditionary learning. You got to, but if you're told in the classroom, keep your hands to yourself. Don't touch that. Stop doing that. Now you're suppressing this person's learning style. And I'm like, that's who I'm looking at. I'm looking at 10 little boys who have one of these 5 other learning styles that's not being taught in class. And so when they receive information, it's like another language to them. They might as well be speaking in tongues. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. And it's making me feel uncomfortable. I hate this place. I hate how this makes me feel. I feel dumb. I'm that fish. I literally feel like a fish out of water. And I said, but check it though. This is when I blew their mind. I said, check it. Instead of running away from the school system and saying, I hate school, if you ran towards it, because, hate is tied to your passion that propels you towards something. If you run towards it and get educated in your learning style, and then make your learning style become your teaching style. I say, you're future educators. The reason why you hate school, if you think back to what I'm saying, the thing that you hate is the thing that you were meant to fix on this planet. If they're telling me that they hate school, I told all 10 of them, you're future educators. They got real quiet and their eyes got real big. And I was like, yeah, I'm looking at 10 future educators with a learning style that when it becomes a teaching style, will reach others who have the same learning style that feel out of place in this broken system.
Right.
That's revolutionary. They're the solution, but they're being marginalized.
Exactly.
And being prevented from fixing the system.
Yeah.
How's that hit you?
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting you use that example because when you ask me the question, what do I hate? The school system and how they specifically treat like young Black men or boys. That's more specifically what I like. If I had to, I just wanted to give like a more broad term.
You're generically saying it,
yeah. But in that specific instance, that's what I mostly dislike as a person who, went to school. Like, I can attest to that. And I know people who I'm in close friendships with now, and they say they'd be in a much better place. I mean, we only just turned 20. We in our early 20s. Most people I know. And they're already telling me I'd be in a better place than I am now if the school treated me better and took my learning style more seriously. And it's like, it's not even like our life's over, but it's the fact that we think that at such a young age. Like, we just got here and we already think, just based on the societal standards that's been put up, we already think we failed based on how we were treated in our adolescent years. So that's that's the fuel that you were talking. That's kind of like the passion.
Yeah. If you have a group of friends that feel like this, then I would, it's making me think of, had you heard about this pact? I think there was a book called The Pact that came out maybe a decade ago, and it was 4 brothers who said, hey, look, we're all going to become educators or doctors or something. They all agreed that they were going to support one another and be accountable to one another to achieve this high level of education that they hadn't seen in their communities and in their families. And this pact, they all honored it and they all made it. I almost feel like you and your friends need to form some kind of pact that says, hey, look, let's become the thing that was missing or the person that was missing in our lives, in the lives of young men that are coming up behind us, because we know what it is. When you're in the middle of the system, you can only focus on how it makes you feel. And that's really how ministry works. The best ministries are built off of the trauma that you experience as a youth or as a young person, because when you experience that and you see it impacting somebody else, it becomes personal for you. And that becomes that passion where you're driven like, no, not another person is going to go through what I went through. Right. And so this, these other young men that you're talking about, I feel like you all, there's scripture, it's Genesis 15:20 that says God took what was meant for evil and used it for good. Joseph got imprisoned, right? He got thrown out by his brothers, imprisoned like twice, and then came out on top of Egypt because of where he had been put, and was able to not only save himself, but save his entire family, the entire Israel people, because of what was initially counted against him and what was initially done against him to harm him. That's how this all works. What trauma did you experience? And what system was it that caused it? What brokenness caused it? That you can now, maybe you feel like I haven't fully come out of it. You don't have to fully come out of it, right? Joseph didn't come out of Egypt to then deliver the people. He was still in the system of Egypt and was able to work it, and was able to take what God had given him, which is his ability to interpret dreams, and make that work in his favor. He had found his assignment. And so this is what we're talking about. So I'm going to transition to the next. I already talked about it a little bit, but we're going to go from passion now to talents. Okay.
All right.
Because remember, the talent is, I didn't use this word before, I implied it, but I'm going to say it directly. Your generational talent that's operating in you now, Adonijah Henderson, is the tool that God gave you to fix what's broken. Because when something gets broken around the house, what do you look for? You look for a tool. You look for the right tool for the right situation. And so your talent is that. And your talent can go in several different directions, but you got to know that is generational. So, when people say, I don't have a talent, I'm like, look around you like you do. Look around you and look at your family and see what it is that's a constant thing that's on the inside of you that's operating in them. And then claim that and be like, this is me though, because I'm part of this family. And then take that talent as a tool and apply it to what's broken. That's your purpose in life, actually, to figure out what your God-given talent is, realize that it's a tool to address the thing that's broken, which drives your passion. So love your talent, but the hate is in your passion though. Right. And if you can figure that out, and it sounds simple, but it might take a little while to put this puzzle together. You got some pieces. Right. It's like, how does this work together to maximize what it is that's my passion matched to my talent, right? And so the best example, another example that I can give about how this really works, when people like look at him and they miss what he's done that's genius, is LeBron James. I'm not a fan of LeBron James. I don't really care for him.
Funny. That was on my list of geniuses.
He's on your list of geniuses?
Yeah. I was going to say that, but I just chose Albert Einstein because that was more.
See, it's all coming out. Yeah. So look, I'm going to tell you that LeBron James is a genius, but not for the reasons that you may be thinking. He may be on your list for different reasons.
Right.
So you're probably thinking like, on the court, he's a basketball genius. And I'm not necessarily taking anything away from that, but I'm going to redirect you and say that on the court, that's his talent, clearly. Like you said, we don't have a problem identifying athletes and entertainers. Like, they come from a family of basketball players. That's what they do. Steph Curry came from a family of basketball players. Kobe Bryant, right? We look at entertainers, the Jacksons, like, the Winans, right? They just come from a family that does this. But we, as usual, we see it operating in other people, but we fail to see that the same thing, the same mechanism is on the inside of us, right? So LeBron, you see his thing is starting to become a familial thing because now Bronny is coming up, right? And he's about to come into the NBA and he's trying to play with him. That's a whole other story. But LeBron James's talent is basketball. Right. I've never talked to LeBron, never met him, but I could wager what his passion is based off of what I've seen him do a couple of years ago. So where he came up. He came up in Akron, Ohio, right? That's where he lived. And we know his story. His story is that he had to go into private school because the public schools were trash, right? His neighborhood where he grew up was impoverished. They didn't have the newest books. They didn't have dedicated teachers who were operating in their genius, right? And so he had to make sure that he could insulate and get his basketball acumen to the highest level that it could, which he clearly did, he had to get out of the public school system and go into private school because the public school system was all the way broken. So what did he do once he got his platform as a basketball player, a renowned basketball player, a world champion? He went back to Akron and built a public school that had all the latest technology, the most up-to-date books, right? The best teachers, staffed correctly. That's his genius. Because the thing that I would wager that he hated was growing up in that poverty that restricted or limited or dismissed him because of a lack of resources. That's where I see LeBron James' genius.
Exactly.
And so that's how athletes should be. Like, don't, it's not about, hey, I'm gonna get my mama a house, I'm gonna get me a couple cars, a couple chains, I'm gonna release a rap album. Why, every athlete that get famous want to try and drop a rap album. That was happening about 20 years ago. Right? But it's like, no, like, don't focus on that. Use your talent as a tool to address something that restricted you when you were a youth and restricted your friends and the people around you. So I've been talking for a while now. Like, how's this sounding to you?
That was what I was sort of thinking of when I was thinking of LeBron James as a genius. I was thinking more in the lane of like his leadership qualities in and off the court. I'd say his genius is like more so like just doing what he talks about.
Okay.
That's not really things that many people of his celebrity like practice, if that makes sense.
People in general, because people talk a good game, but then don't back it up. I can't stand that. Somebody say like, hey, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, and then don't do it. I'd be like, okay. So yeah. It takes a special person to be like, basically, my word is my bond. My word is not going to return to me void. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do.
Exactly.
All right. So what is your talent, sir?
My talent, I would say, I mean, I'm a man of many talents, but
this can be true.
First thing that comes to mind and things that many people who know what you're telling is like my talent in like music, like playing the drums. I'd say that's a talent that I've had to, reform over the years, and I'm still like learning.
Yeah.
It's a forever learning skill.
It is.
So I think when people think talent and they're like good at something, you have to realize that like it's infinite. Like you're gonna always be building it.
You should be.
And there's no such thing as like the best person of this talent because
I've arrived. I don't have nothing else to learn to do. Like
like that's not how it works. So
if you do that, you about to fall off.
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly how you fall off. When you get too overconfident in your talent and you don't reform it or sharpen it, then you become you essentially plateau.
Yeah.
So I'd say that.
I had my guest said before, he said, hey, look, I know I have zeros and nines. Zeros are the places that's not my lane. I'm not good at that. And of course, where your zero is, somebody else has a 9. So that's how genius begins to complement itself. Because you don't get mad when somebody else does something that you don't do. You're like, yo, you do that well. I need to pay you for it, or we need to partner because I'm trying to build something, and you have this and I don't. And then the 9s, he says, I never rate myself a 10 on what I'm good at. This dude is like really good at cooking. And he's like, I never rate myself at a 10 because of what we just said, because there's always something that I can do better and learn to improve what I do well. But he said, I never give myself a 10 on anything because there's always room for improvement.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna time out for a second, because if you remember, I invited you on this call because I see some things in you. You mind if I tell you what I see in you? I want to reiterate this again, and you can do with it what you want, because we've already identified you can have multiple passions and multiple talents. I can tell you several things that I hate on this planet. And I can tell you how my talents, my one talent of being a wordsmith, I can address all those things that I hate. So it is possible to be multi-talented. It is possible to have multiple things that you hate. So I hope you receive this. So I told you the thing that made me want to get you on this show is because I was like, look, you have this thing, you have this passion for stories being told in the best way that they can. And when people fall short of the potential that a story has, and we're talking about, we can say it, we're talking about Disney Plus, Star Wars, talking about all these different Marvel, like all these different things that you and I vibe on. And you're always telling me, like, look, I know when I talk to you, when I text you, you're going to dissect like these stories and what's wrong with them, what's flawed with them, and be like, man, I'm about to just give up. I'm about to be done, right? So to me, when I hear you talk like that, I'm like, I'm hearing one of your passions, right? Just the lack of, storytellers are how we pass on information as a people, specifically African Americans. And if you tell the story wrong, you're gonna mess the history up.
Exactly.
So there's this storyteller aspect about you where you're like, I can't stand it when somebody is not telling the story right. You can tell it this way, right? And I believe that your talent, because you are a creative, you are a right brain thinker, which is why you excel at the drums and music. You're musically inclined because you're a right brain thinker. I believe that in that right hemisphere of your brain, there's an entire universe that you all of us take in the world around us, we process it, and then we make it make sense to ourselves, and we tell ourselves this is how we make it make sense for ourselves. And some of us make it make sense for other people. That's what good stories do. There'll be this analogy that's being told about the world that's being put into a story that makes you see the message. It's like a parable that makes you get the point, but not necessarily beat you over the head with it. Like, yeah, I'm making a political statement right now. Like Star Wars has a huge political statement, at least episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6 did, right? But they're able to package it in such a way that they can get you to get the point without getting to without being direct about it. Because if you're direct about some things, people will block it out and be like, well, no, I'm not going to receive that. And so I feel like you have on the inside of you this ability to internalize the world around you and create a space that tells a story that helps people open up their minds to understand the kingdom. I think that's in you. And I think this is why you keep on saying, like, they're not telling these stories right. they gotta tell it this way. They gotta develop the character this way. And so that's one thing that I see in you. That's one thing I saw in you before the interview. But what I see in you now, Adonijah, I've already mentioned it, and I'm going to mention it again, but I'm going to put an extra little umph on it because the Holy Spirit is definitely speaking. So these other brothers, these cohorts that you have, these other young men that are in their 20s that came through this school system and came out of it like, I could have did that better if they had just understood what my learning style was and switched up, code switched and said, okay, let's try to get you this information this way. I believe that you are a leader, just like LeBron said, because I believe you are a person who does what you say. You're a man of your word. And I believe that when you put that word out there, you're going to chase after it with this passion that you have to make sure that it comes to pass so that other minority young men don't go through what you went through, coming out of a system feeling like I'm broken instead of saying the system is broken and it didn't serve me correctly. And I believe you can do that. You can lead these other young men with the talent that's on the inside of you, this creative talent and this teaching talent. I know you say like, oh, but you know your parents are teachers. You come from a family of teachers, but your teaching doesn't look like their teaching though. You're teaching because your learning style is different from your parents' learning style. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think once you understand that, hey, every minister that came under your parents' tutelage, including myself, had to go through this process where we're like, I am not Larry Henderson. I am not Tiffany Henderson. I cannot teach like them, but I can take the tenets of this understanding how to let the word interpret itself and then internalize that with my own talents. And then this is how I teach now. It has taken me over a decade, Adonijah, to realize how to be in my own skin using the tenets that your parents gave me without trying to emulate them. I'm finding I found my own identity. And I think once you get into that place where you're like, this is my talent and this is my learning style, and these are the people who are around me, you have the ability to create something that can open up a lane for other young men to be like, let me show you how you should really fit into this equation though.
Right.
And here's the extra part that I'm gonna put on it. So you're talking about music. You need to talk to Kiara, because Kiara did this interview about a month ago. And the thing that came out that I was like, you should be doing this. She said, I'm already doing it. She's using music to help teach children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that big of it's not a new concept, because that's how we learn our ABCs. You start saying your ABCs right now, and if you don't start singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in your head, tell me you don't start doing that, because that's how you learned your ABCs.
Right.
Music unlocks a part of our learning. And it's just like what I said with this parable. You're learning when information is put in music without knowing that you're learning. You're memorizing without knowing that you're memorizing. Kiara understands that because of her degree, working with children as an educator, and because of her talent as a musician, she now knows like, hey, I can get people to memorize scripture if I just put it to a song. And you see her doing that prophetically every Sunday. I know you do. Mm-hmm. So you should get with her and start to brainstorm and be like, hey, how can we expand this together? And how can I bring other people into this who are musically inclined? Or maybe even, you can teach stuff through sports. You see people teaching lessons all the time with sports. I don't know where you are with athletics, but I know that you're in this gym and you're learning a lot of stuff about life that has nothing to do with that seemingly has nothing to do with you working out, but it's tied. Mm-hmm. And so just overlapping these two things, whether it be music or athletics, and then pairing it with your learning style, you're going to begin to lead other men and unlock the genius potential on the inside of them just by example.
Right. You asking me to come up with an example? Or
what's up?
You asking me to come up with an example? Or think
Say that one more time.
I said, you asking me to come up with an example or just to think about it?
No, I'm asking you just to think about it. Like, how's that hitting you, man? Like, did that do something to you? Does something feel unlocked just now? Like, what's happening?
My initial reaction is, so to a certain degree that has been expressed to me in the past, like multiple times. So like, it's clearly a sign that I should be doing something. Mm-hmm. I say I have the most difficulty processing how these different things like correlate in any way. Like all these different passions or talents or things that I do don't seem to really have that much like connection. They seem very separate. Mm-hmm. And so in my head, I'm like, what does that have to do with this? Or I'm focusing on this. And I'd say like another issue is like, that's sort of like a networking issue, like connecting with other people similar to myself and getting them to like unlock their potential.
But you said you're around like other young men who are in the same, you feel like are in the same category as you, same age group, came through the school system, like, that didn't work too well for me.
Well, what I mean by that is like, I speak to them all like individually, like when we're all together. But in terms of like ministry work or like kingdom work, like that bridge is kind of difficult for me to visualize because everybody's like doing their own thing and they're moving forward in wherever position they're in. So those are like ideas that they're kind of foreign to that I don't even know.
Now, so when I say you're a teacher, I'm not, and this is going to sound, really messed up when I say this, but I'm not even talking about the kingdom right now. You are going to advance the kingdom in doing this because a big part of the kingdom is education. A big part of the kingdom is storytelling, right? And Jesus loved telling parables, right? So these are two separate things that I just talked about. But I'm not saying that you have to become a preacher and be administering the word of God, but the practicality of how God designed you and then seeing other people and unlocking that in them That's kingdom. It's just not as
Mm-hmm.
explicit as being a preacher or a minister who gets up and says, this is the word of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the word of God is active in your life. I can't speak about the word of God when I go into public schools, but do you know how many times I've talked about this concept
Right.
and children start talking about God? Because though it's there, it's just implicit. The
Mm-hmm.
brokenness of the world, the Lord wants to fix it, and He's given
Mm-hmm.
us talent to do it. That's kingdom.
Right.
It's not spouting scriptures, but it's the whole story of the Bible.
Right.
And so when we begin to walk out that story and not just walk it out, but understand the role that we play in that story that's unique to you, that's unique to me, then we begin to our light begins to flicker and it begins to shine. But you remember, this is very much, your mom was putting together puzzles over COVID, right? This is very much putting a puzzle together and being like, I don't know if this fits. Like you said, I don't see how these two things fit. Well, maybe turn it this way and turn it this way. Oh, there's a line. I see the connection now.
Right.
Or no, this isn't it. Because you remember, you said it. I'm a man of many talents. So guess what? If you're a man of many talents and you have many passions, they're not, you got to figure out how they fit together. And when they click, you'll know. When you put two puzzle pieces together, you're like, oh, I felt that. That's how that goes. So it's just this exploratory phase that you have to be in. And I would even wager that your learning style may be one of exploratory. I don't know, meaning you gotta feel things out with your hands. And you've been conditioned so long to not do that it might feel a little foreign to start being like, well, I'm free to do that now. Like that's like telling the fish, hey, look, get in the water and fill it out. And you're like, but I'm supposed to be climbing a tree. No, you're not. But put that fish that's flopping around the land and put it in the water. You're gonna see that joker take off. And so if you just begin to explore, and what I really hear the Lord saying though is just like how your acumen for playing these drums was unlocked when you started training with Ben, right? That when you start to hang around Kiara more, and I know she's there a lot anyways, and start to just talk to her about what we talked about today. Hey, what is this that you and Elder Reggie were talking about when you were saying about helping young people learn with music, and just start to learn from her, from what she's setting up and what she has in her mind, and then you'll be able to pick it up and then internalize it for yourself. Right? Don't try to worry about the network, because you know how the kingdom works in seeds. Like first go to the Jews, then to Jerusalem, then to Judea, then to the rest of the world. You got to start small. And that's what this genius equation is all about. It's not, though your vision is large, you always have to start with yourself first. You have to self-affirm and then begin to grow from there. So yeah, don't worry about the vision. I got a network. I got to get these guys together, and I got to lead them. Like, no, that is a part of this word that just came out for you. But you got to make sure that you get trained up first.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, just start studying and asking Kiara, what are you doing with these music, teaching people information through music though? How do you do that? How can I do that with the drums? You do that with the guitar and the piano. How can I do that with the drums? And just see where it goes.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. That's pretty much it, man. That's all I got for right now. But you and I are gonna keep chopping it up. You said you're gonna start calling me more instead of texting. So
yeah,
we can keep talking this up. I'll be there in July. So I appreciate you taking the time to just hear this and definitely receive this seed. And what happens in the kingdom with seeds. It's going to get watered, and then God's going to provide the increase. Right. So you got any last statements, questions before we sign off?
I have no questions. I do need time to think and stuff.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate you hosting me and me be on the show and all that.
Hey man, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep, because it's my uncommon cue to see the genius in you, and that's my sign off. So this has been Reggie Key, motivational speaker, host, author, publisher, presenting Manu Forti Ministries, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, and this has been my genius guest, Adonijah Henderson.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend. available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at Inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.